morning, friends. How are you? Welcome to today's episode of the Checkin In podcast. My name is Binyam. I'm a life calibrator. Love what I do here on the show. Key areas that we focus on as we ask ourselves self-reflective questions. Every weekday, we like to focus on awareness, kindness, and happiness. I've scintillated it down. I've synthesized it down to these three key components because these are the things that I find really helpful for me as I am going through life to become a better version of me. These are the three things that I found super helpful in saying, here's where I want to camp out on, here's where I want to spend time in becoming more aware of me and how I am navigating through this world. Kind because, hey, there isn't a lot of kindness out there today, and so any expression that we can get is fantastic, but I believe it needs to start off with ourselves, showing ourselves kindness first and foremost, because we're a process and change, and can we make space for that to happen? And thirdly, the happiness components. My goodness, let me tell you, I love experiencing happiness. I love going through life in such a way whereby it's like, this is a lot of fun. Most people do, I think, but it's quite fleeting because more often than not, we have a lot of other things that get in the way that kind of serve as obstacles in our pursuit of experiencing happy moments. I think those happy moments are arrived at much faster and far quicker when we are willing to process through all those other emotions along the way that are really necessary and beneficial. So, these three components are some of my main focuses in life as I'm going through it. And this podcast is my way of extending self-care to me first and foremost. And then of course to encourage you guys in the midst of it too, because hey, that's really helpful when that happens. So I like applying myself to this. I like following through on this discipline and then encouraging us to do the same on your end as well. This is the 73rd episode of the Been Checking In podcast. So glad to have you guys. Listen, today's question is one I'm not sure that any of us spend much time focusing on. This is a self-reflection question about our future, but it comes in an interesting way. The way it comes about is as follows. It says, when telling your grandchildren about your life, what would you like to say? Let me read it again. When telling your grandchildren about your life, what would you like to say? I am intrigued by this question for a variety of reasons. Now, if you've been on this podcast for any length of time, you know what I like to do is consider the question we're asking. I don't like to just jump in and ask or answer a question. I want to find out what is the purpose of this question. Why is this question worthwhile giving my time to consider? Are there things that are really helpful about this question, and then are there things that may not serve me as well? I like to engage life from a very intentional standpoint. And so one of those things is seeing what's coming towards me and not just being reactive, but being proactive and considering and saying, why is this really helpful? Why do I want to invest my time answering this question? And so before we dive into the answers of these questions, I like to consider and say, why is this question meaningful? Because when I consider the merits of a question, when I consider the worth of a question that is asking me to reflect, then I can pull a lot more meaning and benefit from that question because now I know why I'm answering said question. I know the rationale behind the question or the intention behind the question. These are really important things. And so that's one of the things I like modeling for you guys as I consider these stellar questions. These have been fantastic questions. Sometimes I'll come across a question where I'm like, "Ugh, I really don't feel like answering this question, but I will still apply myself to the discipline of thinking through and then figuring out how I want to answer said question. And usually what happens is as I'm answering that question, I make some discoveries about myself. I grow more aware about myself in a way that I didn't anticipate, which leaves me the richer for that experience. It's like, hey, that was worthwhile devoting my time to, and I really appreciate that. So that's why I spend time even considering a question because I think we are richer in life when we consider what's coming our way with more critical thinking, with more critical awareness of why it is that we want to indulge in or spend time in doing something. So, again, for those of you coming in, welcome, by the way, all of you who are tuning in on the YouTube channel, on the Instagram, and on TikTok. And of course, this goes live. This recording goes on my Spotify account as well, under the same name of this podcast. But the question, like I was about to say, that we are answering is, when telling your grandchildren about your life, what would you like to say? Love this question for the following reasons. Consider these things. This is a question I don't think that most of us consider on a regular basis. But there are some beautiful things behind this question that enable us to become more aware of ourselves, perhaps more kind to ourselves, and then also to pursue our happiness. These are the three things that I want to knock out of the park as I answer this question. So consider this: how many of us think about our grandchildren? I mean, for most of us, most of my listening audience, we're fairly young. I don't even have grandkids. I have kids, but I don't have grandkids yet. It'll be a long time before I have grandkids. It'll be years, I hope. But how many of us think about our grandchildren? And why should we even think about our grandchildren? I think the benefit of thinking so far in the future about our grandkids' generation, especially with reference to our present commitments in life right now, is it helps us to put some things in place by way of preparation for that next season. Most of us probably have thought about what it might be like to be a parent. Some have said, no thanks, don't want that responsibility. Others will say, hell yes, I want to experience that in my life. But even as we think about our kids, one of those things that we're having to reflect is, what is the purpose for why we would choose a certain pathway in life? And one of those considerations revolves around, will this enable me to not only provide for my kids in the future, but will it also enable me to be available emotionally to raise these kids up and influence them in a certain trajectory? So that's fantastic when we start thinking in terms of, how are we going to influence those that are coming up, that next generation? That's well and good. But not many of us, I dare say, think even further and say, what about our grandkids' generation? How are our decisions and commitments in life right now affecting that later season? That is really important. Where's this podcast? Spotify, and is it live? It is live on TikTok, my dear friend, on Instagram, and on YouTube. But the Spotify will be a recording that goes on maybe 4 or 5 minutes after our time here is over. And so you'll be able to see that. Am I still Ubering? I was in Edmonton and was hoping that you were the vehicle that showed up. Thank you, Taylor. I am still Ubering, but I'm taking a hiatus right now. I'm taking a hiatus so I can focus on my business full time, which you can find out more information on my website, BennyMasters.com. Exciting news. By the end of this week, I'll be releasing a free course, a free guide that I would love to gift you guys with, on the topic of how to have, okay, here's the title of it. The title of this course is The Art of Courageously Initiating Life-Changing Conversations. Most of us love amazing conversations. My goodness, this is turning out to be a plug that I didn't anticipate. But my dear, I'm not driving Uber right now because I'm focusing on my business. I'm putting out on my website by the end of this week a guide, a free guide that I want to gift you guys with, followed by a course that I'll be doing live in a couple of weeks' time that I'll be giving a lot of heads up to and inviting you guys to be a part of. It's going to be pretty fantastic. I would love for you guys to be a part of that. My pod. Oh my goodness, have swag. Where can we get it? Taylor, thank you. Check my website. I don't have merchandise. I'm not sure I'm into merchandise, but I might have to cave on that one in some time. But you can find out information. Follow my content on my website, BennyMasters.com. Send me your email. It'll enable us to keep connected in a really fantastic way. And what's your podcast setup? I've got a microphone here that you can probably see in the screen. I've got my laptop in front of me with my YouTube. I've got one of my phone lines, my cell phone's on Instagram, another one on TikTok right here. And then, of course, I've got my mixer, my small mini mixer in front of me, recording the audio. So that's my setup. My goodness, you guys are full of questions today, which I love. But thinking about our future generations, how many of us are preparing for in such a way that our decisions today, the course and trajectory that we're going in life, is also going to impact our grandchildren's lives? That's something I don't know that many of us are doing, but I think it's worthwhile doing. It's fantastic that one could be thinking in terms of, hey, think so far in the future and prepare in such a way that you're even thinking about your grandkids. Love that dynamic. And I think it's one that I want to be thinking about more. My kids, what is my involvement with them going to be like? What are my decisions now? How are they going to affect them? And so that's why I like this question. When telling your grandchildren, goodness, who thinks about the grandchildren? Well, we're thinking about our grandchildren now. And I'd encourage you guys, as you're figuring out where you're going in life, as you're making those plans, consider also looping your grandkids in and saying, how is this going to benefit and encourage that generation? So, when telling your grandchildren about your life, can I tell you something? Your grandkids are going to be super interested in what your life was like presently. Does the setup take lots of space? It doesn't really. It's all right in front of me here, so I have it all on my desk. I make it work. I like simplicity, and so it doesn't take up a lot of space here. But as I'm thinking about our grandkids, the question asks, when telling your grandchildren about your life, many of us go through life thinking my life is not really noteworthy. It's actually quite ordinary. There's not much to talk about. There's not much to show because I'm just plain person. I There's not much that I have that enables me to be something like of a celebrity. May I suggest that this is not so? Imagine presently your grandparents. What would you give to be able to know your grandparents' experience? How did they make decisions when they were in your season of life? What did they find important at that time? Wouldn't you like to have access to your grandparents' life? Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall watching your grandparents at school? What kind of students were they? Were they rebel rousers? Were they geniuses? How did they make critical decisions at points in their life where you're like, hey, I wonder what it would have been like for them? This is access that is unparalleled that our grandkids will not have if we're not already thinking presently about how we're moving into that season of life. How are we moving forward in such a way that our actions right now can be replayed for our grandkids who'd be like, I want to know because they're so interested in you. They want to know what is it that makes their parents special? Like how do their grandparents think about life and how they made the decisions? This is something that people are going to be like relishing one day, especially your grandkids. So if you're in that season of life where you're like, my life is quite ordinary and there's not much to talk about, let me disagree with you respectfully and say, actually, your life is really fascinating. That's one of the things I've gotten to love in my experience working with people is knowing that everyone has a story and that story is rarely ever boring. I can't think of a person that I've sat down with to like talk and get to know that I haven't been really enthusiastic about what I'm learning from their life. All of us have an amazing, brilliant story, and it's worthwhile talking about. So if you're in that space, in that zone in mind where you're like, there's not much here for me to really talk about. It's quite ordinary and it's just blasé. I disagree. I disagree enthusiastically. I think we all have a story. And our grandkids one day will be super intrigued to find out what was it like in your life. Maybe you're not even going to have kids. What about your nieces and nephews who will look to you as a grand uncle or a grand aunt? Same story. They're going to be really intrigued to know what is it that makes you you. And so your life is not boring or ordinary. In fact, I would suggest your life is really full of experiences that are exciting and thrilling and that others would really want to have access to. Fantastic. Third component of this question. Let me read the question again. When telling your grandkids, your grandchildren about your life, what would you like to say? Here's the thing, it is presuming that others, especially your grandkids, are going to be enthusiastically engaged in finding out what made you you. How do you see the world? How can I learn from your experience? There are others in our lives who are going to be, if they're not already, super engaged about what makes you you in life and what they can take from that by way of learning experience. So, along those lines, my dear listeners, it is worthwhile. It is worthwhile for you to invest yourself down this track of preparing for, thinking about, and hi, Ollie, and wondering how you want to live a life that you can share with others. It's not like you're on display saying, I don't have much to talk about and I feel like I'm on display all the time. It's not anything like that. By the way, I see we have a beautiful sunset behind me, or sorry, sunset, sunrise. You can see it in the Instagram there and the YouTube channel, not so much on the TikTok, but it's a beautiful sunrise today and it's super bright. So if you guys are getting the glare, I do apologize. And I'll move my things so you don't have to like see that glare up in my head in the way there. So along those lines, you have a story to share, and there are others who are going to be super enthusiastic about wondering um, how they can learn from your experience. So let's put away that sense of there's not much here to share. There's nothing noteworthy. I don't buy it. You shouldn't either. And if you want to challenge me, I would love the opportunity to sit down with you and show you just how stellar and engaging and thrilling your life has been through the various experiences that only you've had, through the various lessons that you've learned that others can benefit from, including myself. Think about your grandkids. What an amazing opportunity to be able to extend ourselves and saying, "Hey, this is worthwhile, and we're going to embrace it for all it's worth." Now, my dear friends, let me dive into the answers, my answer for this question. But do you see why I found this really enriching to look at the question and consider why are we answering the question? All these insights just from analyzing the question that we would have glossed by or easily ignored while we're answering the question and missed the flavor of this answer and why it means a lot to us. It's kind of like savoring something scrumptious. That's what we're doing when we're assessing these questions and saying, why is this worthwhile considering? So, here is my response to today's question. When telling your grandchildren about your life, what would you like to say? I would like to say that first and foremost, I got the opportunity to experience an amazing setting as a human being where I'm not the same person now that I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60. Do you see what I'm saying? I love this starting premise for me as I'm talking to my grandkids. First thing saying to say and establish with them is I'm not the same person I was then. I'm not the same person through all my evolutions. And that is one of the beautiful things about us as human beings is that we are a process and change. See what I'm doing here is one, I'm becoming aware of myself. And as I'm becoming aware of myself and saying, I'm not the same. And as I'm acknowledging that I'm not the same person, that I'm changing over time, I'm also extending kindness and saying, and that's totally okay. It's totally thrilling at this season, after decades, that I'm able to still savor and be thrilled about the fact that I was a process and change, even as I was trying to stay aware of those changes over time. And I would want to communicate this to my grandkids as a way of enabling them to have a solid foundation of saying, in your life, what would it look like for you to be aware of yourself while also being kind to yourself, that you're going to be changing over time? That's something that I think would be really worthwhile. And so that's where I presently want to give myself with enthusiasm. I want to make space for those in my life to feel so rock solid sure that this experience, our experience collectively as human beings, is one where we're changing. And that change isn't something that we need to beat ourselves up over, saying, I'm not there yet, but one where we can grow through over time. And that growth is one of the most beautiful expressions of our existence as humans. This is like so central and at the core of my perspective when I see and engage my world, when I engage with others, is seeing others in this zone whereby I can say, hey, your beautiful expression is especially in reference to the fact that we collectively as humans are fumbling our way forward, experiencing new experiences, growing in the process, making terrible and amazing decisions along the way, which gives life an amazing flavor. Can you imagine how boring life would be if we always did the right thing? Uh-uh. Sometimes we have to do the wrong things to be able to learn the significance of why that doesn't work and why we want to choose a certain way. And that's why I like giving full space and acceptance for those that I interact with, because that's also what I want to thrive on myself. And I think that's when we can start enjoying a new flavor in our human experience that is worthwhile talking about. So that's the first thing I'd be wanting to tell my grandkids is grandkids, I'd say the person I am right now is not the same person I was yesterday or a week ago or a month ago or a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and then just keep on going just to hit solid that point that over the years, I've been a process and change. And that change has been what has made my stories really unique and meaningful, impacting. There's no one that's going to be able to share my experiences. And that's what makes it really relishing. They'll be like, holy crap, tell us that story again. Or I've never heard of someone thinking it this way. And guess what, my dear listeners? Every one of us has this access point that we've got stories that no one has ever had before. The sequence in the way that we're learning lessons, the ways that we are establishing our boundaries, the ways that we're establishing our values. All these things are a beautiful combination in the way that they've evolved to be able to make us who we are. Amazing. Can you tell that I'm just a little bit passionate about this? Because this is an amazing consideration. Not only think about our kids, but our grandkids and what we would tell them and how those things that we're thinking about telling them could impact us even today. What does that do for me today? It reminds me, how can I live in the present moment? How can I engage and move forward from this vantage point that says, hey, Biniam, don't try to be perfect. Don't try to have everything in a line, but through the challenges that you're presently experiencing. And can I share with you? I've got some significant challenges in front of me. There are some stress points that I'm, managing. There are some things that I'm trying to process and work my way through. I don't have it all together, even though I may seem like I have it all together. Here I am sitting with a bow tie, looking quite presentable, all that kind of stuff. But like we said in a recent past podcast, we are really good at fooling people and saying that we've got it all together when we're really trying to hold things together. So that's something that I think I would want to also include as I touch base with my grandkids at some few future points. Number one, yes, that we're a process and change, and that's totally legitimate and fantastic and wonderful. But second, not to buy into that collective narrative that we need to present from a stance of competence always. What does it look like for us to be honest about our experience in life hello, by the way, friends, I see you all coming in. um, what does it look like for us to engage this world from a place of vulnerability, of authenticity, of integrity, of honesty? Like these things are really important. And the reason I say these things are so important from my experience is because in the absence of these things, do we rob ourselves of a sense of living life in the present fully? When we're on someone else's agenda, the culture around us, the traditions, all those things that we feel pressure to align with, even though we may not necessarily align with, we rob ourselves of that real expression of what it looks like to be able to say, hey, I'm living life on my terms in the way that resonates with me. That is super important. Does that make sense to your friends? So important. So important. And so, what does that look like for us to move forward thinking and operating this way? That is something I think that is really integral and I want to communicate to my grandkids is don't buy into what you're seeing that others are presenting, because a lot of us are really good at presenting competence, a version of fool's gold that doesn't really reflect with reality or truth. The very people that you're like, hey, they have no problems in life are probably the very people who are at the point of falling apart internally, who probably are trying to figure out the mess that they feel that they're in, but they just don't feel safe enough to be able to honestly present and communicate and share their experience with those around them. I'd say don't buy into that, but what would it look like for you to live life on your own terms? And there's a third key component that I would say is that we experience a lot of riches experientially in life when we're willing to give away generously a lot more. It's a paradox, but the more we are generous with our experiences, with our time, with our love, with our resources, the more generous we are in giving freely with no expectation of getting back, the richer our experience in life gets. That is super significant for me because I've experienced this for years now in a really rich way that has enabled me to say, man, I've been living at this level where life is, yeah, it's challenging, but it's also rich. It's it's impacting, it's life-changing, it's amazing that way. So that for me is something I'd want to convey and encourage them to consider in their own context and saying, "Hey, I'd love to tell you about all the amazing experiences I had that especially showcase my generosity, not to boast, but just to give an example to say, go and do likewise for yourself. What would that look like for you to go and do this and change your world because you were generous, because you had a lot to give? Because the more you give away, paradoxically, I don't still get how this works, the more one is able to get back for themselves. A beautiful analogy, a beautiful expression of how this actually works in real life. Whew, that was amazing. Those are three things that I would want to convey to my grandkids. I love today's question because, man, it gets us thinking even further into our future than we have yet done on this podcast. And in a way, I believe where it's going to provide massive value, not only for those future generations that we're considering, but even for ourselves now. It's going to be fantastic. My dear friends, I was asked earlier a question, and I was just going a little bit into what I'm presently doing right now. And let me just spend a few moments here sharing with you what's up in the forecast and where I've been investing myself. I'm a life recalibrator, as you probably know. I love helping people recalibrate their past experiences so that they can rewrite amazing future prospects in their own context. But as I do that, one of the things I'm often thinking about and trying to plan for is how can I provide even more value? Well, my dear friends, there is a course that I'm just in the midst of putting together. It's thrilling and it's exciting. Again, let me read for you the title of it. You're getting pre-advance notice of this course before anyone else. I haven't even posted this on my platforms, my social media platforms. But the course is titled The Art of Courageously Initiating Life-Changing Conversations. It's my contribution to help you guys experience the riches that I experience on an ongoing basis in connecting deeply with people in a way that leaves you saying, wow, that was amazing. I want to have more of those experiences in my life. I want to see my life transformed because of the way I've extended myself in sharing with others. So I want to share that with you guys. It'll be a free resource on my website. I'm going to have that posted by the end of this week, so stay tuned for that. BennyAshes.com is my website. That's going to be followed in a couple of weeks' time that I'm going to give some advance notice of a course that I'm putting together on the same thing where I'm going to be teaching you through it, and it's going to be interactive. You're going to be able to ask me questions and so on. And so I want you guys have access to that. I'll let you know more about that in the upcoming days. So that's something that I'm applying myself to by way of serving you and ensuring that you're getting tremendous value as we go through this experience called life together. Friends, I so value the time we spend together in these mornings because this, for me, is what continues to help me get centered, get foundation that is robust, a ballast that is going to help me grow stronger in facing the various challenges in life. And I'm so thrilled that you are coming along in this experience with me because I find one of the beautiful things is when we're able to grow together. Growing together, encouraging one another, seeing each other's successes and wins, and encouraging each other when we're kind of like feeling discouraged. That's what you guys are doing for me, even as you join in this self-care portion as I tend to myself. But I hope that your Wednesday, your hump day is fantastic today. I hope that you're considering how your commitments and decisions even today are going to impact those that are coming up in the future. Worthwhile stuff to do those. I hope to see you guys again tomorrow. Have a fantastic hump day. Love you guys.